Good morning. Good morning. Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a good break. Ready to get through this next semester. While we're waiting for folks to come in, anybody do anything interesting with their holiday? Only half the class is here so far. Nobody did anything interesting? I fed a horse. I was going to ride a horse, but then I didn't want to just ride in the woods, so I just went and visited the horse farm. Oh, you moved. Oh, you had, okay. Family from Chicago. Looked at horses and cows. I kind of did that too. And the place where I was staying had the kind of a birds of prey um, presentation. So I got to see these huge owls and a red-tailed hawk, which was hawks are impressive because their wingspan is just tremendous. So that was interesting. And ate really good food. That's good too. That's good too. Yeah, I learned a lot about wildlife. Learn how to feed a horse. You got to keep your hand open. And this one horse that I was feeding, he got greedy and he kept moving all. Every time I tried to move to another horse to feed it, he would move him out the way. He was mean. But I had a relaxing break. Back to life, back to reality, as the song goes. All right. While you're waiting, you could log into Canvas. We are going to start a unit on hair. We're going to start with what does hair look like, and then how they look for not just hair, but hair and fibers at a crime scene. So if you log in, I think I'm on the wrong. Let me go back one page. That's not the first page. Go back. We always want to start with the overview. You want to look at the vocabulary, get the gist of back to the you know the song, Jordan. Alrighty. Okay, so like I said, while we're waiting for everybody to come in, take a look at the overview for analysis of hair, fiber, and botanical materials. So that's three different topics that we're going to look at in this unit. Again, look at the essential questions because I always make the test from the essential questions. And you can see we've got a good bit of vocabulary with this. So give that first page a read. And Got 2/3 of class here. Fun fact is second. That's a good fact, Hill. I just saw what you put up there. That is a good fact. I learned a lot about birds and owls at this presentation. It was not an expected thing, but I went because being the environmental kind of person that I am, I found it interesting. So yes, the presenter gave a lot of interesting facts, especially about the owls. The owls were most interesting. One of the most interesting things is that owls, always says wise as an owl, owls are not wise. They're not. So they said if somebody says you're wise as an owl, they're not giving you a compliment. Because owls are not that wise. So that was interesting. Learned a lot about alligators too, and how to stay away from them. Okay, again, if you just joined, we're in Canvas, and I did publish it. You view it as a student, and we're going to just start looking at fiber analysis, hair analysis, and analysis of botanical materials. Like when you're walking out in a field and these things get cling to you, look at how they analyze those type of things. So again, take a look at the vocabulary, look at the essential questions. And the first module we're going to do today is about hair. So we're going to learn about hair structure, why that's important to know. So we're really just going to do number one today. All right, I'm going to give it another few minutes. Got 2/3 of the class here so far. That's okay, Abigail. I'm having that issue too. I think I need to um, do a deep clean on my computer because it's slowing down so bad. Sometimes it's ridiculous. And I'll say this to you all too, because a lot of the stuff that's slowing me down is all the things that I have saved from assignments and things like that. So I need to start deleting those from last semester. You, being as this is not a state test class, if you need to clear up some space on your computer for things from last semester, you can do that as well. Because I know that slows. We had a lot of big projects and things that might take up a lot of space on your computer. So the this semester is all about this semester, and the end of term exam will be only on these things that we do this semester. So if you want to clear up some space on your computer by deleting some things from last semester, you can do that. And you still have Canvas that you can always come back and look at things. So uh, that's just a heads up. And we're still going to do some of the labs. We've got some labs to do, especially on hair analysis. We're going to do fingerprinting. There's fingerprinting to do. And actually, I'm going to ask you when we get to that to actually do your fingerprint. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and then you're going to send me a copy of that activity. So we got a lot of activity things to do this semester. Okay. All right. So again, as far as forensics is concerned, we some of the evidence at a crime scene is going, and I knew as soon as I started talking, somebody else would come. Some of the evidence at the crime scene is hair fibers and fibers from different materials, blankets and wool and cotton and things of that nature. And those things that have come from plants are called botanical materials. So that's what this unit is mostly about. There are three parts to the hair. So today we're going to focus on looking at what the hair shaft looks like and with the fibers and then how they collect hair samples. So that's what this one is. Today's lesson is about. Alrighty. And I'm gonna give it just another few minutes. So again, go to the next page and start reading this. So here again, they have the study of the scalp and hair is trichology. So we got a lot of vocabulary. And we're going to look at the morphology of hair, structure, characteristics of hair, and what you need to know about hair in order to, so we're going to watch a video and she's going to cover a lot of these things right here. So again, I'm going to give another 2 minutes for anybody else to come and then I'm going to start the video. So give this page a read. And like I said, the video is mostly going to cover structure of the hair. I think I put the video in the queue. We are taping live streaming again. I think I figured out how I get caught up in getting on their bad side. So hopefully we won't get kicked out again, or I won't get kicked out again. Okay. Uh-huh. All right. Go back for just a minute. We had some folks come in. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Everybody should be on camera. That's a school policy. Everybody should be on camera. Later on, they have a new policy as well about AI use. So when it's time for you to do certain assignments, I will bring that to your attention as to what the AI policy is, but it is something that they sent out um, earlier. Good morning. Good morning. All righty. Just for you all who just came in, we are in Canvas and we are on analysis of hair fibers and botanical materials. And the first unit that we're going to cover is hair. So there's actually 3 different topics in this unit. So we're going to do hair. All righty.
All right, forensic students, today we are starting on our hair analysis portion of the unit. Hair analysis covers 2 different lessons, so we'll do part 1 in this video and then part 2 in a different video. Now, before we start talking about hair and its applications to
And I'll do part 2 tomorrow. So we're just going to do part 1 today.
forensics, I want to share this statistic with you. So did you know that the average person loses anywhere from 40 to 125 hairs per day? Now that's a wide range of hair loss, but it's very important to forensics because it is very likely if somebody commits a crime that because of the statistic, they're going to lose a hair in the process. And if investigators can find that hair, then they may be able to solve the case or at least come up with a suspect. So hair has a few different functions. It can help us to regulate our body temperature. It can act as a sensory organ. It also protects our bodies. And careful analysis of hair can provide important clues in an investigation. It may not be able to solve the case, but it can help investigators get leads and help them by providing these clues. Now, hair can be complicated because it can be considered either class evidence or individual evidence, depending on how it's found at the crime scene. So let me go back and review with you from Unit 1. Remember, class evidence narrows down the suspect field to a group of people, whereas individual evidence can narrow down the suspect field to one individual person, which is extremely helpful. That's kind of the goal. That's what we want. But if hair is found with the follicle attached, which is like the bulb or the end of the hair, then nuclear DNA analysis can be performed, and we would say that hair is an example of individual evidence because DNA narrows down the suspect field to one person. Now, without the follicle, the hair can still be important to crime scene investigation, but it is considered class evidence at that point. Now, I always get the question about mitochondrial DNA. So it is possible to retrieve mitochondrial DNA from the hair shaft. That's the part without the follicle, but it's often very difficult to retrieve. And lately, it's been faced with a lot of debate over its accuracy in making positive identifications. So while it's possible to collect mitochondrial DNA from the hair shaft, it's not very likely, and at that point we would still have class evidence. So cases can't solely be solved on the basis of hair analysis unless DNA analysis can be performed and it can be linked to one individual person. And hair can be collected from crime scenes a couple different ways. So plucking, shaking, scraping surfaces are all ways that investigators can retrieve hair samples. Also, adhesives. So adhesives are a way that investigators can collect hair samples. Sometimes, like if they have a victim and they want to collect hair samples from the clothing of a victim, they might use adhesives. So if hair is collected as class evidence, which remember means no follicle, then forensic scientists can make observations about the macroscopic and microscopic features of the hair. So based on these observations, the hair can be narrowed down to a class of suspects. So if you look at the picture on the screen, so macroscopically, I can see this is a darker hair. It is very straight. I don't see the presence of a medulla, but that may be just the image. So what we could note are some things that may lead us to believe that this hair belongs to an Asian female, although it's kind of hard to tell from this picture. But if I was an investigator and I were analyzing this hair sample, if it's class evidence, that may be all I can get from this hair sample. Okay, I can narrow it down to a group of people, say Asian females, but that's as far as I can go without the follicle or the DNA. So hair can be observed either macroscopically, which is with the naked eye. So these are things that we can notice about a hair sample without the aid of a microscope. So things like length, color, curliness, texture, those are all macroscopic properties. Microscopic properties are going to be things that we have to have a microscope to note. So that might be, for example, the pattern of the medulla, which we'll talk about in just a second, pigmentation of the cortex, types of scales, the healthiness of the hair cuticle, the growth of the hair cuticle. So all of those things are microscopic properties that we would have to have a microscope for. Now, the best microscope to view hair samples with is a comparison microscope. That's like a side-by-side comparison. You can see in the image there a great example of that. That just allows investigators or scientists to view these hair samples at the same time, especially if you have a crime scene hair sample and you're comparing it to a suspect sample. So again, these are the three functions of the hair. And a couple of different things about the anatomy of the hair. We're not going to go into too much depth here, but all hair has the same basic structure. So if somebody else is beside you or around you, you can look around and just kind of note the differences macroscopically between your hair and their hair. But we all know that our hair differs in many different ways from other people. You also need to know that your hair within your own head differs. So not every hair in your on your body has the same macroscopic and microscopic properties. So there's two parts of the hair. We have the follicle and the shaft. So if you'll look at the picture, the follicle is like the root portion, and it contains that nuclear DNA, and then you have the hair shaft. And then you have within the hair shaft 3 different layers. So you can think of the hair shaft as like a pencil, where the very inside part that we would see in a pencil as the lid would be the medulla. And then wrapped on the outside of the medulla, you have what we call the cortex, which is the middle layer. And then the very outside layer is the cuticle. So we're going to go through each of those 3 types, and I'll show you some images of those. So starting with the cuticle is a transparent outer layer of the hair shaft. So it doesn't have any color, transparent. Its main property is to just protect the cortex and the medulla. So the cuticle is made of different scales that overlap. And those scales move from the scalp to the very end of the hair shaft. Now you might think, why is that important? Well, when investigators examine hair, the part of the shaft that's closest to the scalp is the youngest part of the hair. So if somebody dies under suspicious circumstances and they may suspect that they were poisoned or exposed to some sort of drugs or toxins that may have resulted in their death, they can use different hair samples and test those hair samples using a process called neutron activation analysis to test for the presence of these toxins and drugs and other metals. So that can be important information. The inside part of the hair inside of the cuticle is known as the cortex, and it makes up the largest part of the hair shaft. When you look under a microscope, this is the part that you will most likely see. The cortex contains the pigment or the melanin, which gives the hair its color. And then the very inside or core portion of the hair shaft is the medulla. So the medulla can be difficult to find when looking at a hair sample with a cheap microscope, but if you have a pretty good microscope, you might be able to see the different medulla patterns. Now, there are 4 different classifications of medulla patterns, and you can see in this picture we have absent, which means no medulla. You have a continuous medulla, which is like just a straight line down the middle of the hair. You can have an interrupted medulla or a fragmented medulla. So you see the different variations. All right, so that ends lesson 1, and I will see you again in lesson 2 for the rest of our hair analysis lesson.
Okay. So this is in your...
We're going to go through hairs and fibers
Oops.
evidence in this video.
All right, hold on.
We're going to go through hairs and fibers.
Okay. So yeah, we'll do the other one, part 2 tomorrow, but I do want to come back here. I'm going to come watch this one in a minute, but I did want to come back to the module to point out the things that she talked about and where they are in your module. And again, the video is in your playlist so that if you wish to watch it again, you can do that. Okay. So again, she talked about, so she's going to get into more depths about the second part down here with the scales, but she did go through all of the layers of the cuticle up here. She talked about the medulla. So that part, again, if you want to read back, we'll get into more depth about that. So those of you who came in late, I'm going to give you a chance to read that over. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and do attendance. So finish reading this page and then I'll come back and we'll do the second part. I think everybody who's coming is here. And again, we do have an activity that you'll do next class that'll have you Gizmo activity that'll have you looking at hair fibers and samples and things like that. Again, so everybody should be reading up while I'm doing attendance. And there's a lot of vocabulary with this unit, so if nothing else, go back and familiarize yourself with the vocabulary. Where did I say I go? There you are. Why does it say you're offline? Okay, so the next page in the unit is dealing with more on how to collect evidence. And so this video is going to talk a little bit more about the structure of hair as well, but it's also going to deal more with um, the collecting of evidence. Mhm. Like I said, I got to do some cleaning up because
We're going to go through hairs and fibers evidence in this video. So we'll look at the different parts of the hair, the different types of fibers, and then how these can be used in forensics.
so some of it he's going to
So
repeat what
hair is
she
made of
said.
an important protein called keratin. All right, the hairs are produced from hair follicles. So if you look over here in the picture, you can see what a normal hair follicle would look like and how it would promote hair growth. All right, but then if someone was to go bald, basically what happens is that follicle will shrink, and eventually you get to a point where the follicle is so small that no hair actually grows. Okay, so you get these follicles during your fetal development, and you don't get any more after birth. So that's why once they do shrink and kind of get smaller, that's why baldness, you kind of can't really fix it. And then the color in a person's hair is due to the different pigments that are present in the hair itself. There's a lot of different things that affect a person's hair, including genes. All right, so that your genes can determine, the shape or texture of your hair, but there's a lot of natural things that we can do to the hair that can mess with the appearance, like, nutrition. There's people will do intentional things to it, like getting it curled or permed or dyeing it. Um, by looking at a hair, you can determine maybe where on the body that hair came from based on its length, shape, or size. But in order to have DNA, you must have the root present. So just finding a hair doesn't mean you're automatically going to get a person's DNA. If the root is not there, the DNA will not be present. So if you look closely here at this picture, that's showing you the root of that particular hair, and that would contain the DNA. There are three main parts of the hair here. The outer part we call a cuticle. All right, so you can see that here in yellow in the picture. The outer part is a cuticle. It's made of these overlapping scales. All right. The inner part here, the very, very middle, is called the medulla. All right, that's the central core. And then the cortex is kind of just outside the medulla, and that's where the color originates from. Okay, so the cuticle is the outer part, the medulla is the middle center part that runs down the center of the hair, and then the cortex is around the medulla that contains the pigment. So it's very easy to think of the structure of the hair as being like a pencil. Okay, so the outer kind of paint covering of the pencil would be like the cuticle. The medulla would be like the lead part, right? And then the cortex would be the wood on the inside underneath the paint. So as I said here, the cuticle is made of these overlapping scales. All right, so the cuticle itself can have different types of scales. There's three basic patterns: coronal, spinous, and imbricate. And you can see all three of them here in the picture. So you can take a look at them and see, how they're different. Coronal's kind of like, I always like to think of it as like donuts being stacked on top of each other. All right, whereas something like imbricate's kind of this like overlapping pattern. Right? Almost looks like some type of weaving taking place. So it is very useful here to help differentiate the hairs of different species, but it's not useful in determining if the hair is from a different person. So you can look at the cuticle and say, okay, well, it's human versus, say, dog hair, but it's a little bit more difficult to say that, a particular hair belongs to a specific person just by looking at the cuticle. All right, so the cuticle has some variations in it. It could be different size. There could be pigment present or maybe not. So you can sometimes see these scales when you're looking close at a hair, But the good news is you don't have to memorize the different
Okay, and I
types
want to pause it there
of
for a minute too. These three words are also words that are in your vocabulary list. So I don't know whether you're taking notes or not, but you can always go back and watch the video. But these are also words that are on your vocabulary list.
the cuticle patterns, but you should be aware that there are different patterns that exist. The cortex, which is just outside the medulla, is the part of the hair that is the most important in determining if a hair belongs to a specific person or not. Okay, so this would be the part of the hair that's very useful for that. Looking at the cuticle doesn't really help determine which person the hair came from, but the cortex would. And the cortex can be different colors, thickness, texture when you're comparing different people here. So a very important part of the hair itself. The medulla, or the middle part, is very important for determining different species, but just like the cuticle, it's not helpful in determining whether or not a hair came from a specific person. All right, so sometimes the medulla may not even be there at all. You won't see it, but it can vary in thickness. Sometimes it might look like it's broken. All right, so you can kind of look at some of these pictures. You can kind of see here in the pictures, it looks like the medulla is broken a little bit. And then sometimes it's not even there at all. Okay, so the medulla, in order for there to be DNA present in a hair sample, the root has to be there. So the root has the DNA, and if it's not present when the hair sample is found, you won't be able to get DNA from that sample. But the root also provides other information that's important. You can look at the root and determine if the hair was pulled out or if it fell out, which is very important in a crime because this would give some information about whether there was a struggle or if something else had taken place. So if you look at the picture here at the top, the root is pretty much kind of intact, looks kind of nice and clean, versus down here you can kind of see it doesn't look as nice as the one that just fell out. You can see that there was probably some kind of struggle that took place. So the root has the DNA, but it can also provide some other clues here about what might have happened in the crime. Hair is a very common form of class evidence unless you have the root, unless you have enough of the DNA present in a hair sample. It's just going to be a form of class evidence. It's not going to be able to identify a specific person, but people, shed hairs daily, all the time. So if you look at the fact there, it says that about 100 head hairs per day are being shed. So you figure in a 24-hour period, you're losing about 4 hairs for every hour. So a lot of times this is the type of evidence that's left behind at a crime scene, and you might not even realize that your hair fell out. A lot of information can be learned from hairs that are found at crime scenes. So just by looking at the hair, you can determine, if it was a human hair or an animal hair. Sometimes you could determine the race by looking at the hair. You could also figure out, based on the hair and the thickness, where it came from on a person's body. Was it, a head hair, an arm hair, something like that. You can determine by looking at the root if it was forcibly removed. You can also determine if the person had done any type of chemical treatments to their hair. Did they go to the beauty salon and get it dyed regularly? But you can also use hair as kind of a timeline of drug use.
All right, I'm going to pause it there just to say this is a test question. You do need to know what can you figure out by looking at hair samples. What are the things that you can determine about a hair, about the hair sample that you collect? So there's 6 things pieces of information you can get from that. And again, you can go back and watch this again if you want to take notes on it.
By examining the hair, you can see if drugs were taken and then also a history of the drug use depending on the length of the hair. So you can gather a lot of information here from hair if it's found at a crime scene. If you look at hair under a microscope, there's a lot of physical differences that you can see in the hairs, but it's very important that you understand that there's differences between human and animal hair. All right, so these are the things you would expect to see different between human and animal hair. So in humans, the medulla is typically about 1/3 the width or less, but in an animal, the medulla could be much greater than that. It almost looks like it takes up more of the hair itself. So if you compare the human to the cat hair here on the left, you can see the human hair, the medulla is barely visible there in the center, but if you look at the cat hair, it's a very large prominent part of the hair. All right. You can also see this banding pattern in terms of the coloration in animals, where humans usually just looks like one solid color. In terms of the cuticle, you usually only see the imbricate pattern in humans, but in animals, you could see all three. All right, so if you remember those patterns that we saw with the cuticle, you could see all three in animals, but only imbricate for human. And then in an animal, most of the pigment is very, very close to the medulla. So again, if you look at this picture of the cat, you can kind of see the pigment kind of being closer to that medulla, whereas in a human hair, it would be more spread out. So these are some important differences between human and animal hairs. This slide is just showing a comparison between the different types of animal hairs, and you can even see human hairs on here to compare them. But typically you would see a larger medulla in animal hairs, more of the color closer to that medulla in animals. Humans, the color is going to be kind of more spread out. And if you could actually see the cuticle patterns, you would see all three in animals. Okay, so you can take a look at this slide, pause it if you need to look at the different types and make comparison.
Oops. Give me a chance to pause it. All right. So yeah, take a minute to look at that, what the different hairs, and this is what they're looking for when they send it to the lab under the microscope. So they have comparison slides. People don't actually have all of this in their head. They have a handbook that they compare all of these pictures to, and they know this is what, and as you can imagine, there's a large variety of animals. So there's a big book that you can compare these pictures to. So nobody memorizes, oh, I know off the top of my head that, unless they see it a lot in a particular area, then they know what it looks like. But there's a handbook with all these comparison pictures in that they can compare their sample to the picture in that handbook.
Okay, so you can take a look at this slide, pause it if you need to look at the different types and make comparisons. Fibers are very similar to hairs in that they are a form of trace evidence that can be found a lot of times at crime scenes. So it would actually be very useful if you could find unique fibers at a crime scene to be able to match them to a specific person. But a lot of times there's just common fibers found, so they're not too helpful with respect to finding an exact person. But a lot of times where they're more helpful is with cross transfers. Okay, so if you can find similar fibers between two people, that can tell you a lot of information about maybe they were in contact or maybe they were together or in the same area. Okay, so they're typically not going to be able to identify an exact person, but they can definitely key you in on the likelihood that people were together or in the same areas. There are two different types of fibers. The first type we're going to look at are called natural fibers. These basically come from nature. They are fibers that come from plants or animals. So some good examples here are silk, cotton, cashmere, wool. If you look at the pictures here, cotton, you can see here on the left, is the most commonly used plant fiber, and then wool here on the right is the most commonly used animal fiber. And if you look closely at the picture, take notice of what you're seeing. These are natural fibers, so they don't look as perfect. They're not kind of as perfectly arranged as you might expect for a fiber here. And we'll compare them to the second type of fiber in a second. But these are coming from nature. That's the key to remember. They're coming from plants and animals. Synthetic fibers are the second type of fiber, and they are man-made fibers. Okay, so I like to think of these as being synthesized. Okay, they are made. So some examples are nylon, rayon, polyester, spandex, and these make up a large portion of the fibers that are produced. So if you look at the pictures here, you can see how these are different from the natural fibers. All right, so they look like they are, perfect. All right, because these were man-made, All right, natural fibers are coming from plants or animals, so they don't look as perfect under the microscope. These kind of have this perfect structure to them. All right, so that's a big difference between synthetic and natural fibers under the microscope. So if we compare here the natural and synthetic fibers, we can see some of the differences here under the microscope. So cotton here on the left would be your natural fiber, and rayon on the right would be your synthetic fiber. All right, you can clearly see how the synthetic fiber is kind of nice, beautifully, kind of a nice organized fiber there, versus this one doesn't look as organized because it's coming from nature. All right, so you could see colors, you could see thickness, but you can also see something called a delusterant when it's present. Sometimes delusterants are added to fibers to make them less shiny, especially a lot of these man-made ones. They would be very, very shiny, so they add some delusterant to them so that they are not as shiny. But you can clearly see some of the differences there between the natural and synthetic fibers. Here are some more microscopic views of the natural fibers on the left and the synthetic fibers on the right. You can see here that these kind of, on the left, the natural fibers are not as perfectly organized as the synthetic fibers on the right because those are man-made. This picture is just showing you a delustered fiber up close. Remember, a lot of these fibers would be very, very shiny, so they add a delusterant to it to make them less shiny. So you can kind of see this speckled appearance that the fiber has here, and that would be important so that the fiber is not going to be as shiny as it would be without it. So a lot of times if you are trying to figure out what type of material a fiber is, there's a lot of different things you can use here to differentiate the fibers. You could look at them under the microscope. You can burn them. Okay, they will burn differently. Maybe some will kind of, curl away from the flame. Some might melt. Some might leave a residue. Sometimes they give off a different odor. So there's chemical tests that you could do to the fibers to figure out what type of fiber it is. You might be able to analyze the dye or the density. So there's
Okay.
definitely
So
different
again,
ways
this
here
is a
you
list
could.
of things that you can use to differentiate different types of fibers. So again, you can go back and pull this up and look at that as well. But you do need to know if you collect it, other than looking at it under the microscope, there are other, because a lot of fibers look alike. And so there are other ways that you can give differences in their chemical structure and texture. Okay. So make sure you come back and visit that list as well.
Analyze the fibers to figure out what type of fiber it is. This slide is just showing you a comparison here between different types of fibers. So you can look at this and see how some of these fibers might look under a microscope.
Okay, okay. All right, so again, both of those videos are in your playlist, and you can go back and check those out. All right, so the time that's left, because I know most of you have not read both of those pages yet, so I'm gonna give you time to. We've done a lot. Here we are. All right, so again, start with, and actually he just covered a little bit of the third one as well. So go back and read. Today's the first day reading, relaxed reading. The collection. And he also, okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. All right, and go through, so on the third page on fibers, go through and look at this presentation as well. So again, so with the few minutes, the last 10 minutes that we have left, um, go through and make sure you read the first 3 pages in Canvas, and then do this activity here that goes through the different types of fibers. Mhm. Okay. And again, next class we'll have an activity which asks you to analyze fibers. So do read, do read. And again, vocabulary, vocabulary. Please take note of vocabulary. He talked about the difference between natural fibers and synthetic fibers. And everybody, so again, synthetic fibers mean it's man-made. They make it up in labs. So polyester and rayon and things like that are not natural. They make your clothes last longer. They don't wrinkle as much, but they're not natural. So there's a difference in those. So again, read the first 3 pages in Canvas and take note of the vocabulary. And then go through this activity here. Now I have a question for you in a few minutes, kind of like a ticket out the door. Okay, so I put two questions in the module, so it's there in the module, but it should also be on your home page on your to-do list. Actually, I'm going to look at it from both places. So I just clicked on it from the module, so it's there. Let me look at it from your home page. All right, so from your home page, it's hair and fiber analysis. And you don't have enough time to finish, but you have enough time to look at it and get a head start on it. So we'll give you time on, I'll see you again on Friday to work on this question when you come in. Okay, so you can get a heads up look at what the questions are and know that we're looking at having them really due on Friday. I may change the due date on Friday, but um, we're going to try to make sure that things, even though if this says it's available until the end of the month, we're not waiting until the end of the month to answer the question. We're going to try to stay on top of all of our work daily, use class time to do class work, and so that you can not have a whole lot of things to make up at the end. Okay, so there's two questions. Uh, what is one characteristics of the hair? So they gave you all the different sections of the hair that a forensic scientist examines, and how can it help distinguish human from animal hairs? So again, you might want to look back at the video for that, but it is also in Canvas. And the second question is fiber analysis. Why are fibers considered class evidence rather than individual evidence? And how can fiber evidence still be useful in linking the suspect to the crime? All right, so again, you might need to go back and revisit the meanings of what's the difference between class evidence and individual evidence, okay, before you can answer those two questions. All righty. So again, in the time that's left, you can get a head start on looking at answering those two questions. Again, I'll give time sometime at the beginning of next class for you to work on answering those questions as well. Because I know homework is one of those things that's kind of a wookie word, but some of you do homework and some of you don't, but class time will be allotted for you to make sure that you get these um, two questions answered. And again, if class time is given, please use it so that you do not fall behind in your assignments. Okay. Oh, and the school now has a policy for AI use. You can use it, but do not just copy and paste an answer where you just put this question in and uh, copy it and paste it in. Use it as a reference and then try to put it in your own words so that it shows that you learned something about it, not just copied the answer from someplace. So so if you haven't looked at the new rules for AI use, please take a look at those. In fact, I'll stop sharing for a moment. See if I can. Oops. See. Okay, folks, time's up. So if you're in a good place, you're welcome to log out, and I'll see you on Friday. Have a good rest of your day.